and I would like to introduce Dr. Daniel Mugnier. Daniel is head of research and development at TECSOL, one of the French leading solar engineering companies. He has professional experience in engineering solar thermal systems for large DHW applications and, above all, solar heating and cooling systems. Daniel is involved as well in numerous research and development projects on solar cooling at the national, European, and international level. He is also author of several publications and presentations in international conferences on solar cooling. TECSOL has achieved more than 50 feasibility studies on solar cooling and has designed 10 working installations since 1990 on solar heating and cooling. Daniel is currently Vice Chairman of the European Solar Thermal Technology Platform, Vice Chairman of the IEE Solar Heating and Cooling Programme, and Operating Agent of IEA SHC Task 53. Jason Bourne, I think. Daniel, welcome.
Okay, so, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor and the pleasure to speak about solar cooling, and it will be made in two presentations. One will be much more on the situation in the world and giving you the different possibilities available actually on the market and the latest development which could be useful in the next future. And I will make in my second presentation, after a presentation of Mr. Keul on prices, a particular focus coming from a study we just made for the Arab League countries on the MENA region and the potential of solar cooling. So I will be able to give you some lines, some possibilities, some trend which could be of really big use, especially in Qatar, about this question of solar cooling. So, to introduce the presentation, I think it's important to focus on the energy challenges for Qatar and MENA region. Firstly, there is a strong commitment of the Arabic countries to reach ambitious objectives and scale up of renewable energy and energy efficiency. That's really a first statement, which is very, very, very useful because the direction is really shown. Second, there is a very important share of the energy consumption due to air conditioning. It's really something very obvious, and so it's a second very important statement to have a successful development. We could even take the example of Europe, where it's not so obvious. Southern countries, of course, have air conditioning needs, but a large majority of the European countries are not in this case, and the problematic is much more on heating side. Next is, there is a huge advantage in the region, and I think it's another very obvious aspect. It's you have an infinite resource, which is the sun. A huge amount of irradiation available just in front of your door. So how to go and spread cost-competitive solar cooling? And that's really a key aspect. Cost-competitive on the life duration of system, which is 20 years. It's not about just a fantasy or just a very smart idea. It's really to go on a real application. So for that, international studies really strongly show that by 2050, it's, I would not say tomorrow morning, but the day after tomorrow, about cooling, there is a really important aspect which could come from solar. Because if you think a little bit about, there is very, very few renewable energies able to produce cooling. So here you have the resource, and this roadmap is showing that by 2050, 17% of the worldwide demand could be easily covered by solar. If we make a focus on specific regions, you see that Africa and Middle East has a big potential of growth, especially in this world where you see this purple pink trend is really growing a lot. Of course, it's not at the size of China in terms of world potential, petajoule, but it's a very important aspect. And you see that systems are really going to start entering markets now. To have this growth, we need to really start implementing it now. And you will see in my next presentation that is totally feasible in this area of the world. The technology is here. It's not, we need a transient of appropriation, implementation of these technologies. So now coming back to the basics very rapidly, not making a course about it, but two main channels for preparing cooling in 2016. Solar thermal cooling and solar PV cooling. These are really two parallel possibilities, offering, you will see, different advantages, some drawbacks for each of them, but at the end it's to feed energy, thermal or electrical one, to chiller or air conditioners, and then to have this air conditioning available. Now about the specific focus on solar thermal collector technologies and application. I won't go so much into details each technology per each technology, but it's clearly showing you that we have a very large panel with very different applications, different temperature levels, which are technically working very well. It's not R&D, it's really available on the market. So the next question you have all in your head is, for which price? So of course I will develop it. But you see that we are able with solar thermal energy to drive, to make between 40 degrees and 100, 250 degrees in terms of heat, let's say, source, and to produce between -20 to, let's say, soft cooling, I would say, which means that it would be between 10 and 15 degrees. Of course, it's not permitting to dehumidify, but it's able to provide a certain form of sensible cooling. So that's the state of the art. And now, a very important aspect to understand why we are at this stage with solar cooling. Just look at the figure. There is nearly 1,200 systems installed in the world last year. This is the totally, let's say, listed number of installations using solar thermal cooling. So you have to compare it with the figures of annual sales of air conditioners. Just to have a figure, it's nearly 80 to 100 million units per year. So it's totally not the same level of commercialization, scale effect in terms of cost of production. A high level of innovation is still present and progressing and on the way. Heat rejection. Heat rejection here in this part of the world, in Qatar, for example, is really a quick question. And you will see in my next presentation, I will propose and indicate ways to deal with this, especially by developing R&D programs. There is an important electric consumption reduction. Already, these systems are very, very efficient in terms of electrical efficiency. And of course, the most important is the high level of innovation is necessary at the moment to decrease the investment cost. And at the end, the global cost, which means the cost per kilowatt hour on 20 years duration. For that, we've started 2 years ago, IEA Solar Heating and Cooling Program project called Task 53. It's, let's say, the code number, permitting to address these different topics. And worldwide experts from nearly 10 countries, member of this implementing agreement, are working on this topic. And it's really already very accurate concept for Arabic countries, especially for low and medium temperature solar thermal absorption. And we are dealing as well beyond solar thermal approach, the PV approach, small size PV air conditioners. The technical status, in a few words, there are major components available. Main progress were made in the last decade. At the moment, you can dispose, and some of them are tested at court, small-scale heat-driven chillers. It's possible, it's available, it's even commercialized. And there is an increasing number of, let's say, high-efficient chillers, bigger ones. And there are developments of systems using single-axis tracking, solar collectors. Mostly they drive double effect chillers, and then they are able to, in a big size, to produce very efficient solar cooling. The main technical shortcomings are still on the system level, no more on the component. Heat rejection, I have mentioned that already. Energy management and control, because these systems are more complex than a single domestic hot water system, and then to go for prefabricated. But there are already available prefabricated systems. Again, at Gord is tested a prefabricated Japanese full solar cooling system. And of course, here it's very important, Qataris expert engineers need to be more and more aware and trained and skilled to develop these technologies. Now on the energy performance, I think we are really already in advance. So it's a little bit paradoxical, but many systems lead to measurable energy savings, a lot of energy savings. And we are at the moment for systems available on the market reaching very easily electrical efficiency of more than 6 to 8. For large systems, it's even beyond 20. So compared to the actual compression chillers, there is no way, no problem. We are far better. The target value is really to go beyond 10 in all of the systems. There are many systems, however, who do not manage these values because in practice they are not optimally designed and some of them are not optimally operated. So beyond only the system itself, it's a matter as well of awareness, training, and expertise. And I'm sure that here in Qatar, it will be very easy to have this transfer as soon as the products are available and there is really a good framework condition for that. Now, a few words on a mine of information. If you are really interested in the technical details on solar cooling, I just invite you to Google this keyword task 48. It was the previous former task dedicated to solar cooling, where we did a lot of investigations to different subtopics related to this technology on solar thermal cooling. It's a question of competition. Of course, in the world, there are a lot of possibilities, renewable, non-renewable, and at the end, the money is really the key aspect. But it can be, and it's a big asset for our technology, it can be now considered in the long term. And then we speak about global costs. Not only, let's say, payback, which is maybe a little bit restrictive. And we need absolutely still an intensive R&D of improvement on solid system selection to lead to this, to win this game against competitiveness and economically competitive solutions. And there are innovative concepts. And one is coming from the Netherlands, is belonging to our task and our collaborative projects, and is actually, again, tested at Gord. It's a solar cool concept, adsorption chiller, very compact and able to work perfectly in the Qataris conditions. And of course, they are for bigger size, very important companies, and you will have a specific speech tomorrow about this Japanese company called Yazaki, able to produce absorption chillers in a range of tens to hundreds kilowatts cooling. But beyond that, this company, beyond manufacturing a chiller, is really engaged in developing full system concept adapted to the region. So the basic concept, if we come back to electrical approach, because there is not only electrical thermal approach to produce solar cooling, it's to start from a PV components, air conditioners, and you have a load. And of course, by default, you could think it's very easy. I have the PV production, I have my compression chillers here in Qatar. No technical shortcomings, no technical problems. There are some. The first is how to control it. Because of course you can use the grid to buffer everything, but if it's going to be developed in a large large size, large large part of the electrical grid, it will create a lot of problems. So you need to put together as much as possible in terms of control these two, one source and one use. And then you can use storage, and thermal storage will be a very interesting aspect. And of course, you can use as well electrical storage. And at the end, it must avoid to solicitate as much as possible the main grid. You can produce local or close to, and you can use local. And of course, this big stress on the grid, if massively developed with renewable, could be used for other purposes. Because once again, cooling is really, really fitting between source and uses. And in Qatar, probably you are with more than 50% of your electricity used for cooling in the residential sector. So it's a big, big challenge. And of course, as I mentioned, you can use the grid, but it should be as much as a reserve as possible. And in terms of categories of PV cooling systems, as I did for the solar thermal approach, you have two main categories. You have the solar air conditioners, which are like split units could be used. Here in Qatar, I'm not sure that's really the must. And of course, already there are available products coming from Asia on the markets. They are very raw, not very advanced, not very optimized, but it's already existing. And the second category, which is much more into the development phase, it's PV plus what we call in the world heat pumps. But here it would be heat pumps used mainly for cooling, of course. And it's for the range of, let's say, tertiary buildings, office and commercial buildings. So, to conclude my first speech, solar cooling highly needs innovations, and especially to target cost reduction and 30 years reliability and performance. That's really the target at the moment. Beside that, there is a high stimulation from the PV sector to the solar thermal sector for small to medium cooling power range. There is a high priority targets in terms of markets for the solar cooling branch. All experts agree you are in the first rank. You have all the conditions to make a success story on it. MENA region, and I will develop how we could do in my next speech. And beside that, there are other regions which are really target regions. China is a big challenge for this, and the Sun Belt, generally speaking, south part of the US. And you see that it's not this time Europe. Europe is not the first target of solar cooling. And there are very promising segments for solar thermal cooling with large system concepts. And you will see how in my next speech. So, thank you for listening this first presentation. And I give you rendezvous in a few minutes.